What's up guys, welcome back to Deck Tech for Decks. Today we're doing a deck tech on Thalia and the Gitrog monster. This guy's gonna ramp you, this guy draws you cards, and it's gonna send our opponents back to the Stone Age with that stacks effect. The deck's pretty simple. Half of the deck wants to value off of lands entering the battlefield, and the other half of the deck lets you put additional lands into the battlefield, whether that be from your graveyard or straight from your hand, or even on top of your library. Without further ado, let's get into the deck tech. We have our landfall triggers with a Myria Angel. This one's just gonna net you a 1/1 white bird creature token. Felidar Retreat is super flexible. You can either create one of those 2/2 cats or put 1/1 counters on your whole board. Next up, we have Greensleeves. This one's really good because not only can it be massive, but it's going to create us those 3/3 green badger creature tokens. But let's be honest, the real reason we play this card is for the protection from planeswalkers and from wizards, am I right? Lotus Cobra. I really like this because some of our lands do enter the battlefield tapped, but this guy's going to make it to where they're basically entering the battlefield in untapped, right? Additionally, whenever we use a sack land like Evolving Wilds or Myriad Landscape, it's going to net you 2 mana, which can be pretty impactful. Nixilis the Fallen, we can go ahead and deal a lot of damage to our opponents with this guy, and he's going to get massive while doing it. Rampaging Ballast, it's just a staple in landfall decks, and it's really good at what it does. Scoot Swarm, this one's really good at what it does, am I right? Additionally, you will need a calculator because this card can get nutty pretty quickly. Tireless Provisioner. I really like this card a little more than Lotus Cobra because it's going to give you those treasure tokens. That way you can use the mana whenever you want to. Tireless Tracker. This one's going to give you those clue tokens that you can sacrifice to draw a card. Notably, if we have Tireless Provisioner or a Lotus Cobra onto the battlefield, we can generate the mana off the lands to go ahead and sack those to draw the cards, which is pretty useful. And he's going to get pretty big. Horn of Greed. Yes, this card works on our opponents too, but our commander literally has you can play an additional land tacked onto it. And our goal with the whole deck is to cast these sacrifice lands from our graveyard to net up to 4 landfall triggers per turn. So I'm fairly confident we're going to get more value off of it than our opponents. Moving on, our next category consists of the cards that let us play additional lands and let us play lands from our graveyard. Ancient Green Warden. Let me paint you a picture, guys. Okay, our commander already lets us play an additional land, right? This is going to allow us to play lands from our graveyard, and it's going to double up on our landfall triggers. So if we have a sack land such as Evolving Wilds in our graveyard, we play it, we're going to get 2 landfall triggers off of that. And then we sacrifice that to go ahead and search a land up from our library that enters the battlefield. We're going to get 2 landfall triggers off of that. Well, now we can play an additional land because of our commander, so we're going to go ahead and do that again. This will net us a total of 8 landfall triggers. That's pretty insane. Sword of Forge and Frontier. I really love the design of this card because not only is it going to help our commander get through, I mean, he really doesn't need help since he does have First Strike and Death Touch, but anyway, we're attacking with our commander, right? And then we get to exile the top 2 cards of our library, and if they're both lands, we can play them both, and if they're not, we can play one of the lands and cast the other one. Either way, we're getting through our library, which is what this deck wants to do, and we're playing additional lands while we do it. It's perfect for the deck. Conduit of Worlds. I'm really happy with how this card plays. Not only does it let us play lands from our graveyard, which is what half of the deck wants to do, but if we lose one of our target key pieces, we can cast that from the graveyard. Notably, it will be the only card we'll be able to cast this turn, but it's worth it just to get that back. We then have your more standard stuff like Ramana Excavator, Crucible of Worlds, and Perennial Behemoth. This will give us a total of 5 different cards that'll let us cast lands from our graveyard. That's gonna give us some pretty good redundancy and make sure the deck is doing exactly what we want to do, which is get those 4 landfall triggers a turn. Titania is amazing in the deck because we are sacrificing lands every turn to make sure we get those 4 landfall triggers, and while we're doing that, we're getting these giant 5/3 elementals, which honestly can end the game pretty quickly. We have the OG undomesticated version of the Gitrog monster. I really like having this guy on the battlefield because honestly, the deck works really good with the commander we have already because it does give us access to white, which I think is really important. But once this guy hits the battlefield, the deck gets turbocharged to a new level. You're drawing a ton of cards, you're playing even more lands, and if your opponents don't stop you, you're just gonna win the game. We also run Exploration and Oracle of Moldiah. Oracle of Moldiah is another insane card in the deck, right? Because it's going to give you a total of 2 additional lands on top of your already 1 additional lands. So now you can play 4 lands per turn. So you're going to get another 8 landfall triggers while this guy is on the battlefield if we are doing what we want to do, casting those sack lands from the graveyard. Lastly, we have Augur of Autumn. I really like the ability to play lands from the top of my library. That way, all of my draws are always gas. I mean, even lands are kind of gas in this deck, but honestly, it feels so good knowing that your next draw isn't going to be a land. And then once we get 3 different powers on the battlefield, we're going to even be able to cast creatures from the top of our library. Augur of Autumn is honestly really good. Moving on to the category I have appropriately named Kill Me, because our commander does sacrifice a creature whenever he attacks, so it'd be kind of weird not to utilize that in some form or fashion while building the deck. Wormcoil Engine, everybody's favorite card to sacrifice. Not only is he going to give you more fodder whenever he dies, we do have some card draw triggers off of 3/3s entering the battlefield, so that's going to be useful. He's just a really good value card to put in the deck. Cura the Boundless Sky. I really like this card early and late game. Early game, it's going to net us the lands that we need. In late game, we're going to get a massive creature off of this guy. Marin of Clan Neltoth. While we don't want to sacrifice this one, it's going to get all of the cards we want to sacrifice back to our hand. Protean Hulk. While this guy's just a value card in this deck and we're not trying to combo off with anything crazy, you could just, tweak a few things and, take this deck to the next level. Solemn Simulacrum. Who doesn't love this sad robot? He's going to net you a card and ramp you, and we'll bring him back and do it again. With Kodor Ghost Chieftain. I really like this guy because he's a really solid late game card. Moving on, we have our supporting cards like Eternal Witness. This is just really good for getting our key pieces back from the graveyard. Lightning Greaves is going to ensure that our commander stays safe. Remember, it is a stacks piece, so our opponents are going to be gunning for it. We also run Swiftfoot Boots for this reason. Diabolic Intent is a really efficient tutor. We'll just sacrifice one of those many tokens we create to search for any card in our library. Concordant Crossroads is also amazing in the deck because imagine casting an Avenger of Zendikar, buffing our plant tokens +4, and then passing turn. Our opponents are going to do everything in their power to get rid of our board. Well, Concordant Crossroads takes away their option to do that. And remember, all of their creatures are going to be tapped. And even if they have haste, doesn't really matter because all of their creatures are going to enter the battlefield tapped. Pathbreaker Ibex is also an amazing game ender because we're going to be creating a lot of tokens, and this is just going to buff them up, give them all trample, and we can take out our opponents. Alright, let's move on to the ramp, and I did something maybe a little controversial. I included all 4 of the Signets in a landfall deck. The reason I did this is because honestly, you just want to get your commander out as fast as possible, and Signets are one of the best way to do that. We also do include Soul Ring. Secure Tribuilder is also going to be an amazing way to ramp, and we can bring them back with Recursion. Farseek, just a staple. Nature's Lore, really good because you can search for a forest, so if we have some dual named lands, that's going to be really good for color fixing, and that's going to do it for the ramp. Next up, we have our card draw in the deck. Elemental Bond is going to make sure we draw a card whenever a creature with power 3 or greater enters the battlefield. Notably, a lot of our landfall creatures can set that off, so it'll basically read whenever we play a land, draw a card. Guruk's Pack Leader does exactly the same thing. Toski, Bearer of Secrets. I like this guy because we're going wide, and he can draw us a lot of cards going wide that way. Orin Frostfang, the same thing, but he's going to give all of our creatures Death Touch as well. Pretty amazing. Skull Clamp, I included this because our commander does sacrifice creatures, right? So all we have to do is make sure this is equipped to the creature we're going to sacrifice, and we're going to net 2 cards. Additionally, there is a couple ways to make 1/1s in the deck, so it's still useful in the traditional way. Guardian Projects is going to draw us a card whenever we cast a creature spell. Beast Whisperer, the same thing. Alright, let's finish it up with the removal. We have Lauren of the Third Path. I really like this girl because 1, she can draw you some cards, and she's a better Reclamation Sage. Then we have Reclamation Sage. Assassin's Trophy is just going to get rid of any permanent we need off the battlefield, along with Generous Gift and Maelstrom Pulse. Notably, Maelstrom Pulse is really good against other token strategies. Just make sure they don't have a sack outlet or they can sack it in response and your spell will fizzle. Beast Within, another really good permanent removal spell. Toxic Deluge, just a solid board wipe. Farewell, this hits everything and does whatever we need it to do. Austere Command. This can be a somewhat one-sided board wipe, but 9 times out of 10, whenever you cast it, you're just going to wipe the whole board. And lastly, we have Bane of Progress. I love this guy. He's been putting in work, destroying all those enchantments, all of those artifacts, and he always ends up pretty massive. Alright guys, that's going to do it for the deck tech. I hope you guys enjoyed. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe. It really helps me out, and I'll see you in the next one.